Right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kish Hirani. Is my mic working? Oh, good. So this is going to be slightly different, where I'm actually going to tell you to remove your phones, everybody, and you're going to log on to a website, and this is going to be entirely interactive. You, as much as myself, will be moderating what topics are discussed on there. So if we can just get on the screen, we're going to use this thing called Slido. So if you just go into a URL, any browser, pick your favorite browser, and type in slido.com. And the code for this event is THX1138. I'll ask at the end what THX1138 refers to, but somebody can probably shout out now if you're geeky enough. But without much to do, I'm going to try and explain. Before I do my intro, I'll just give you a very sort of housekeeping on Slido. It will literally take the next minute or so, and then we are kicking off. We'll do an intro of the panel itself. While they're introing, you are going to start interacting with Slido. So great. Slido, it's, as you can see on the stage right now, it's a tool which is completely interactive, and I can see everybody's logging in on. So just so that I know you've logged in, I'm going to change the screen to what you are, probably shouldn't be interacting right now on this screen, but on this screen instead. So there you go. Right, so start filling that in, so at least I know you are interacting with me. So a bit of sort of housekeeping on Slido. This is live right now, so please do not, I mean, you can take photos and everything of the presentation or so, but if you put it on Twitter or Telegram or so, anybody who can see this code can interact with us. So I've got my able assistant here, Manon, who is actually a digital moderator. She is going to make sure if anybody puts anything profanity or so, you might get 2 seconds of laugh, but she's going to edit that out and throw it out. So we've got sort of, it's quite a complex sort of operation going on. It all works. I've done Slido for like about 2 years, moderating panels every single time it's worked. So there's always a first time it might not. And you can see people who put question mark, that goes on there. But I mean, you get a cheap laugh, but it gains nothing else. Right, okay. So I'm going to get started. I'm Kish Hirani. I think I'm going to top Oscar when he said he's in 20 years in the video games industry. I'm actually more ancient than that. I'm 23 years in the video games industry. So I started off as a programmer, and thereafter very much became a technical director, so mainly managing really, really smart people and taking credit for what they did. And thereafter moved into platform holders, started off with Microsoft, and thereafter soon moved to Sony PlayStation. I was head of developer services at Sony PlayStation, and that's anything which is technical, anything linked with technology for the European or the historic PAL region came under my division, so that's middleware relations and anything you can think of. But more importantly, virtual reality also came under my team to go and disclose to developers. And that's where comes, I'm now the CTO of a company called Terra Virtua. I think a couple of presentations have name dropped us, so thank you for that. Terra Virtua is, in very short, and this panel is not about Terra Virtua, but it's a virtual reality content hosting platform. So in short, it's effectively we are creating Netflix equivalent for virtual reality. You pay a monthly subscription, and all the content is for free, all the virtual reality content. We are aiming it at gamers to start off with. And that's enough. I'll talk about Terra Virtua. I'm going to look at the screen, and then I'm going to pass on to the rest of the panel because I'm going to move on to the next poll. But what's always interesting on this is you always have the host country be the first. More interesting is I've never, ever managed to guess who the second highest in terms of audience will be, and it seems like Switzerland and Poland is. My guess would have been England because we've probably got about a few over here, but that's interesting. And as I said, this is not linked to the panel itself. It's just something to make sure you guys are interacting. We've got 32 people who are interacting. If you want to jump in, you can jump in anytime. So without much ado, I'm going to let our panel introduce themselves, and I'm going to move to a next poll while you're listening to them. Marguerite?
Sure. I'm Marguerite de Courcelle, CEO of Blockade Games. You might have seen Ben do a presentation on our first title, Neon District, yesterday. I've been in the crypto space, blockchain space, since 2013. I started out making, combining art and Coda's art and puzzles with blockchain. And from there, it became more and more interactive, and I just naturally found myself making games in the blockchain space. And so I'm really excited about seeing this space bud in the way that it is now, really starting to take off and be here with these guys.
Great. Gabby?
Hi, I'm Gabby, Dizon, co-founder of Alto. I've been in the game development space for 15 years, held a lot of roles. First one was technical design, then I put CD in a box so that we could ship the game. I've done biz dev, production, localization, CEO, and now we have a platform that helps game developers put their games on the blockchain.
Hi, I'm Alex Amsel. I've also been in the game industry 23 years, most of that time was running a game studio, but I'm also a software engineer by trade. From doing some work on an indie game called Euphoria, I got involved with Bitcoin 5 or 6 years ago. Did something called the Bitcoin Bundle, which is with 2D Boy and some other indie developers, and continue exploring this space. But I've got one thing to add, which is just about what we're talking about here. I've got the creativecommons.org website open, and just to say how they would describe a use of Creative Commons, just for some context, one goal of Creative Commons is to increase the amount of openly licensed creativity in the commons, which is the body of work freely available for legal use, sharing, repurposing, and remixing. And I think that's very, very relevant to everything we're talking about.
François?
Hi, my name is François. I'm a developer at Virtua Expand. Actually, I've been in the video game industry for only 2 years, but I'm from the web industry, and right now I'm doing the research part at Virtua Expand, and I'm very interested in how do you make fully decentralized game. I mean, not only with blockchain, but also decentralized database, decentralized hosting, and I'm very excited to talk about that.
Great. So as you can see, you guys are putting in your polls up there. So I am probably the list. So I will be less than 1 year. So I've only been with Terra Virtua since November. So I think every single person here is more qualified, apart from the 26% who've put 23% who've put less than 1 year. So I'm going to move on to the next poll, and then we're going to get started with the panel itself. So if you guys can start filling this bit in. And what happens now is I'm going to get the panel going, and we'll look at these results at the end if we get time. But what we can do is, by the way, there's a report created on Slido, and I can actually distribute that if anybody wants after this session. OK, I've just realized I have to kill the poll to go on to the next screen. So make sure you fill this screen in, and then we move on to the next. So there you go. So actually, thank you, Alex, for doing the intro part, because that makes it a lot easier on what the topic we're talking about, what Creative Commons is. And in fact, the subject line of the panel is exactly the question we are going to open to our able panelist here. So is blockchain the new Creative Commons license? Who wants to start on this?
How did I get this one? So I said earlier, just from what was on the Creative Commons website, because a lot of people don't actually know what that is. But there's been a lot of work by a lot of lawyers interested in intellectual property about how we can make better use of intellectual property while still rewarding the creators of that property. Yep. And now I also think alongside that, which is important, is the notion that open data should theoretically increase value. They're very, very related concepts. And so, is blockchain the new Creative Commons license? No, it isn't. But use of blockchain and decentralized technology should allow us to expand upon what the current state of the Creative Commons licenses, and will allow us to do new things that have been just not possible to do before, because we have a common piece of infrastructure to actually store critical information on, and to have a common protocol. So I think it's going to inspire new ways of looking at things, and we've already seen that with the CryptoKitters team having to suddenly think about how can people use our cats or kittens in other games, the visual representation, the metadata, and the ownership of it. How do we license that without losing complete control? Or should we just lose complete control? Oh, also the smart contracts.
Does anybody else want to add more on that? Well, whoever is going to add on, those who have figured out already, you can upvote the questions, and I can see questions are coming up as well. And so the 4 questions which we put on there was what moderators, the show organizers, and the panelists decided we should be talking about. But you can actually override that, as you're already doing that. As you've figured out also, you can upvote as well as downvote. So people can gang up and probably download a lot of probably less exciting topics. So start using that as well. And so yes, let's carry on.
I think that you can't lose the artist's ability to monetize as well. I think we have a real opportunity for artists to have, with the third-party art markets, and them to have a new way to be being paid that they've never had before, like directly from the user, like for skins or, I mean, I think some games have tried this experimentally, right? But that ownership, like, where's the line of don't forget the creators, like the real content creators? They deserve to enjoy success too. It's not just making a game or it being a game asset.
And I think context also matters. So, you know, I mean, CryptoKitty is probably the easiest one to say. Using that in a first-person shooter, which is just Call of Duty style or so, and this cat appearing, I mean, it's probably funny, but it just doesn't work. And the creators of that IP probably didn't want it to be used for violence or so. So again, that becomes an issue as well. So, I mean, has anybody got comment on how blockchain, again, the focus will always be, why is blockchain something we can actually make use of this in a different way and secure such an usage which otherwise wouldn't be possible?
So there is a concept of asset. An asset is very difficult concept because you can think of asset as only the smart contract. It's only the metadata actually of the asset, and there are also the 3D or the 2D painting, and there are also the characteristic of the asset inside the game. And the blockchain technology is only the metadata, and I think this is very important not to forget that, because you can use CryptoKitty as the metadata, the smart contract. And I know that you have a CryptoKitty, for example. So if you have a CryptoKitty in my game, you can have a spaceship cat, and this will be very nice. But I wouldn't use the image of CryptoKitty. And yeah, this is a very good question. Like, should we put the data, the image inside the blockchain through whatever way to do that, or should we keep it out and just focus on the metadata about the assets? And this is an open question. I don't have the answer, actually.
So I'll give you a bit more about Terra Virtua, because it's a virtual reality closed platform. We'll be hosting virtual reality content created by third-party developers, including second-party, which we will fund as well. It's very easy in that, because we've got an avatar, which is your second life in Terra Virtua, and the avatar is fully customizable, which means you can actually use customized options. So it's a very simple example. If you grabbed a cowboy hat or something, then you can use that in every game, which will provide the API, which is hosted inside Terra Virtua. And again, to us, we're fixing it that it should be non-essential. It should be just eye candy. It should be visual. There's no way you would want a big axe created by somebody suddenly going in a game and actually having the power of a big axe and completely changing your gameplay. So I don't think any game developer would ever want that sort of scenario. It should be just visually eye candy. So for us, because it's a closed platform, we definitely have planned this, that we want this going in there. But I think for this topic, and I wouldn't say I think what we're discussing is how do you get developers talking to each other and actually allowing that. Let me, so I had the pleasure of talking to the CryptoKitty guys while they were here, and they gave me a brief background of what happened, because you can actually use CryptoKitty in your games, so they provide an API. So a very short history, what they told me was they had a locked API to start off with, and moderations and just managing that became almost impossible. And the magic, what you're seeing right now, happened is when they opened it up. So anybody can then use that API now, and they've got a lot more structures and moderations and documentations after they actually opened it up rather than leaving it closed. Which I think absolutely fantastic. If the CryptoKitty guys are still in here, that's what a fantastic move. So maybe, how about, so we're actually moving on to the second question, which actually I think is related to as well. Any game developer will tell you that the game economics are highly sensitive. What makes us think that games can work with assets from the other world? So
Yeah,
sort of
look at
roughly
Adora,
mentioned
just getting to the point with a question. Where are you, Dora? Yeah, oh, this is a very good question. And I think we're only starting to see experiments on how world, like items and characters are starting to happen. I think this is one of the newest and most exciting things in the space. A lot of veteran game developers and investors I talk to don't believe that interoperability will happen in a big way because yeah, the economies are different, but I think it's important to think that there will be new business models that will be created from this kind of operability. You shouldn't really think of it from the framework of the previous business model, where, of course, if you're operating in free-to-play and then other people come in with their items, of course, that's not desirable because you lose money. That's if you're sticking to the current business model. So what's interesting is these experiments to see what kind of economies and what kind of business model will emerge around like new forms of gameplay that were never possible before.
Sorry, I wish I was on the panel rather than a moderator because I've got so much to say about Terra Virtua. So one last time, because it's a closed system. So we have a strategic partnership with Opskins, and hopefully everybody has heard about Opskins and Wax. So what we are planning as well, the vision, grand vision is, because the skins will come into Terra Virtua, and we will allow that skins to actually go inside games which are created in virtual reality for Terra Virtua World. What my vision is, you should be able to fight the biggest bad boss and finish that level and have battle scars which are on your skins, bring it out into the Terra Virtua World. In Terra Virtua World, it's a metaverse, so you've actually got a trophy room, and then you can bring in friends because it is Second Life, so to show off, what, hey, look what I've got here. And then again, being is like, by the way, if you pay 10,000 Terras, you can have it, and it's yours forever with smart contracts, and that's guaranteed. So we're using blockchain for the purpose of like guaranteeing what has been achieved in a game which was not anything to do with Terra Virtua except we were hosting it, suddenly having some value because it's got battle scars, and that gains the value on there. But a lot of people will say, well, 10,000 Terra is just a crazy amount of money. I can only afford a small amount. Can I rent it for 2 weeks? And that's something, again, we see in blockchain and smart contracts. You can, yes. So 2 weeks, that'll disappear from your trophy cabinet, and it'll go to the other person who's using it. So is there anything exciting you guys are working on, or you want to work on, which blockchain will enable?
Well, I was going to comment on the assets in games.
Yeah, please do that.
And so, for example, in our Discord, we're working directly with another project called Age of Rust. Mm-hmm. So he's been an advisor with us, but also we've been developing side by side as he's been building a 3D world. And so that collaborative process about where our storylines cross over and how like assets might be composable in the game for outside of the world questing and have basically multi-universe experiences. So, I mean, we're thinking about that really early. And then also just been chatting with Renee with his project on Decentraland, and they're building an RPG. And we're thinking, oh man, maybe we should get together and chat about our stats and talk about like, yeah, so what if that experience, our assets, you could take a level 10 from our game, go and be a level 10 in his game, and the stats line up, so it's appropriate. And that way you've just doubled your hours of gameplay, or at least doubled, right, for your users. Absolutely,
yeah.
I just want to say, just again on the same topic, that everything that you just said is basically about connecting communities when it comes down to it. Because working with other developers is really, really good fun, and as indies we can kind of afford not to see everyone as competition, which, you know, some of the bigger companies cannot do that. But what we want to do really is, yes, it's fun, but we want to connect the communities up so we all benefit. Because at the moment, unfortunately, in the modern world, our communities, for most of us, are not really our communities. They're Valve's community, or they're siloed on the iPhone or whatever it happens to be. By connecting the games up, we're connecting the communities up. So for our next game, and our next game, and our next game, those communities will keep coming back, and we can keep giving them more value. Especially our older players, they become, you know, highly valuable, and they have lots of items of value because they've been playing for so long. They've accumulated this sort of not just social wealth, but actual real value. And I don't necessarily mean trading value. I think often we talk about trading as if everything's tradable. You can have tokens that are not tradable, but they come with, but they're part of your character, your user profile, your achievements. They can also go with you and be valued between games. So talking about using assets from other games is, I think people look at it at the wrong angle, and they look at it, as you said, the angle of current business models. There are new business models here, and that's how we should be thinking about it.
Yeah, I think it's the point here is about cross gaming actually, and there is two way of thinking cross gaming. Do you do it in your own universe, or do you do it with other universe? And at the beginning we said that other universe is very difficult because of the image, because of the characters and design of the game. But if you build your own universe like we are doing at Bit2Expand with the Nexarium, you can create a timeline, like the history of the game, because you are on the blockchain, so every transaction is a part of the history of the game, of the universe. And this is very fun for game designer to create their universe and they put a game, and then because this guy, he did this thing at this time, okay, it will change the way the other game will happen. And this is something very exciting, I think. And I haven't seen that yet because blockchain is quite new, but I hope I will see that more in the future, to have timeline game, even games that just last for 6 months, for example. Just, okay, you did the game at this time, too bad for you, it's over now. So yeah, I think
I have a question for you though. If it's within your own game universe, then you don't really need a blockchain for it, right? Because you can kind of manage a database kind of to go across games, because these are games that you're running yourselves. What do you think about that?
Yeah, the first question I ask all the time when I see blockchain project is, do you really need blockchain? And sometimes, yes, because, I mean, I know you're not very fond of that, but I'm really sure you can do a lot of good games based on the design of your players, actually. So by doing blockchain, like say Vitalik, I mean, you cannot change the stat of your wizard if you are on blockchain. I mean, if they don't want to, if your player don't want to, okay, they won't use this version of the game. So this is a gift you give to your player, and if they can craft the history of the game, I think this is a good offering for them.
I just want to counter your point about if you're one company and you've got multiple games, you don't need a blockchain. Like, I used to think that was really obvious and clearly true. Then I found out the realities of how a lot of the big companies work and why they were interested, which was everyone's split into different teams using different technologies. And in some ways, it's a similar problem to when you've got different companies trying to agree APIs. And if you can, even if it's an internal blockchain to the company, not necessarily a public blockchain, there's something there that forces teams to agree a common API where you've got an ultimate backstop for what your players own, and then they can the teams that actually promote the new games and try and find the whales and bring them to the games, or try and value players. I've had quite a few conversations, surprisingly, which showed even some really well-known companies have no way to do this, and it's really messy and extremely manual. They hire large amounts of people to actually look at this, and a blockchain can just help. Although it's not needed, it can help actually create a better process.
And I mean, I've worked in lots of development studios and multiple teams being managed or so, and that's where your C-levels, a CTO level, or even a VP of development comes along and says, well, don't think of it whether it's going to be available in the game right now, because a lot of these games now are not one-off download, play, and it disappears. They're ever evolving or so. So think of the future of the game, that you might decide in your sort of version 1.5 or something, start using blockchain, and the last thing then you want to do is go and rewrite everything, or try and just throw away the game and rewrite the whole game just so it works in the future. And I think with blockchain, that is the amazing opportunity we have. And I think if anybody claims they know exactly how to make the best killer app blockchain game ever, then they've probably already failed. And there should be, I think we should be moving towards where make sure you're prepared to make game assets, so that in the future, if you decide one of the teams who's not working on blockchain, because I mean, if you're running a good business, you probably want one team not to be working on blockchain, not putting all your eggs in one basket. But if then things change, suddenly they can move in within a month or so onto the blockchain.
I was going to say, it's also really important, I think, for us to work collaboratively to establish the standards that we're going to be using, at least early, because this interoperability all comes down to that and how those assets and contracts are built and designed. So I know Engine's been doing a lot of work on 1155, and we have been having conversations there. I just think developers, if they're working internally with what they need or what their designs are designing for, like, you should go and participate in those conversations. because it shouldn't all be private and behind the doors, because together that's like where the magic may happen.
And I think with things like that, I'll probably give you a bit more example of how it worked at Sony, which you'll be surprised. But this way, we've got the consortium of blockchain alliances, so none of these things happen. I mean, we sat here in a panel discussing this, and we'll probably agree on a lot of things, but thereafter, then nothing else comes along. We wouldn't exchange emails. We might. But I think forming some sort of consortium, and in fact, my vision is hopefully let's try and get all those who are interested, please get in touch with Manon and let's form sort of a group, at least start discussing. So I'll tell you how it happened at Sony on PlayStation 4 is a classic example where it's a very super successful platform and a console which was released, but that was designed by developers. I actually went physically out to all the key developers. We start with middleware, so we went with Unity and Epic first, and disclosed PlayStation 4 some 7 years ago, so 2 years before it was ever going to come out. And we saw what they would like to have on the platform itself, and then we went out to developers. But it needs somebody to sit down and talk to everybody what it's going to be, right? PlayStation is a complete different way it was made, because A is thereafter then goes into a sort of secretive design, and then you see the product at the end. But everybody actually had a say at some point, because at the end of the day, it's the games developers who are going to make the games on that. So if you don't include them part of the process, then you literally, they'll cherry pick what they can do on the platform and then leave it out. So I certainly am very pro, and I would love to get involved if we set up something where we sort of discuss some sort of common standards or so, and then present that hopefully to a lot of wider audience who necessarily don't want to take part, and that's how we'll get sort of adoption. So, what do you? Sorry, are we going away from what audience wants and what we want to discuss? But I'm very keen on that. Which, so yeah, I mean, how would you? I'm very keen on actually having discussions after this rather than a panel being the end of everything. And that was a good conference. Let's forget about this and talk about it exactly the same time next year. Have you got any ideas of how we can carry on talking about this?
Yeah, yesterday there was the blockchain game islands, I
Yes,
guess.
absolutely.
So this is the best place to go, and everybody go there and speak with us. This is exactly the place.
Right. Okay. So this is actually from the users. So I'm going to move on to that if you guys are happy with that. Is it possible to create an autonomous video game studio today? What are the tools that you would use to do it, and what is missing?
By autonomous, I think they would mean like a DAO-like video game studio. I think you're the most interested in that. So, yeah.
Yeah, this is.
Did you plan this, by the way?
No, thank you. So yeah, this is very interesting because I want to see that. I don't know if it works. So I'm really sure it won't work. I think it's experimental, but I would love to see that because you have to. Because as a game designer, it's a job. Game designer is a job, and your player are not game designers. So how to make your player game designer of your own game is really challenging, actually. And I don't have the answer, but I have some clues. Like if they play some time, if they have reached a level, you can say, okay, you know well the game. So if you want to introduce a new design inside the game, you don't want to mess it up. Because so first you have to have like some age in the game, like if you want to vote for your president, for example, and then you have to ask the community to vote for your new design. And but this I think it's very important that the community that votes doesn't need to be able to, like, for example, if you are level 5, you can vote, and if you are level 10, you can introduce a new game design. And I don't know if it will work. I'm really interested in any experience like that, but I think we can do something like that.
There's another question which is at the bottom. Could a DAO be able to promote Creative Commons content, and how so? And I think this is actually really related. Because when we say autonomous video game studio, that means more than like making game design decisions. That means programming. It means all the engineering side. It means the audio side. It means the graphics. It means QA. It means marketing. It means PR. I mean, it's just endless. So one of the best ways to do that is going to be to experiment with like the DAO projects that are out there, which there are a few. I'm biased because I work with one of them called Colony.io. Go visit it now. But it's all open source, and they've just run a hackathon. So, and one of the things I want to see is people trying to create guild management software and esports management software, and user-generated content management software on there, where teams who are spread all over the world, who don't know who they are, don't know who each other are, and could be in countries which don't even have good banking, can work together to create content. So there's some of you may not know, because a lot of us here are from the blockchain industry rather than games, but there is quite a well-known Iranian game conference, and there's a lot of really good Iranian developers. And because of the US sanctions against them, it's extremely hard for them to make a living, because it's almost impossible to pay them. They're really talented. So it's not quite an autonomous video game studio in that case, but they can use this kind of software we're talking about for governance and for management of a payment to actually get their content out there. So I think those experiments are what will allow us to see if we can then move from there even to something even more autonomous. But you need governance, and that's the critical thing.
Can I just quickly add on Iranian, because it's quite close to my heart as well. When I was at Sony, we used to have amazing Iranian developers coming along wanting to develop for PlayStation. And being a Japanese company, Japan had no issue at all whatsoever. Because some of our APIs and codes are written in the US government had issues. So we could not work with the Iranian because, although it was a Japanese company, because Sony is quite international. We were based in the UK. We had R&D division. We developed some of the API components. But because a tiny bit of the components, or maybe even 1/3 of the components developed in the US, we couldn't work with them. And blockchains and what we are talking about, I love every single person who's creative in this world should have the right to make games.
I was just going to say one of the governance projects that I've been tracking is the Decred project, and their new proposal system, Politeia. You're allowed to submit a proposal, and then the community accepts it or not, and then you can also ask for funding. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of waiting for someone to do a game over there, and because they have Lightning and those kinds of features. So yeah, if you need funding and you want to do a startup, I mean that's a great opportunity. So governance is going to be really big.
So not going to plug Terra Virtua again, but I am. That's exactly what we're doing as well, is user-generated content. So then you vote and decide. So you'll have this sort of crazy area in Terra Virtua will be experimental VR, and you can go in there. And so this is people who don't know much about VR, so can make something in there, and the users can vote on that. And then we start funding, and we can help them fund through blockchains as well, because we've been through that. We've been through ICO. We've met our soft cap through ICOs. So we don't want developers spending time raising funds and doing the ICOs, etc. So we want them to make video games. So in VR, it's actually very easy. Then actually we can fund the titles which are popular inside Terra Virtual World.
I want to pick out this question. Blockchain gaming is not all about making profit, but also, and first of all, making better games or gaming experience, right? So for us, it's about in enabling new gaming experience that weren't possible before. So at the end of the day, a blockchain can enable you to do several specific things that it does well, and interoperability is one of them. And so the end goal, of course, if you're the player, is still have a fun experience. And if players are having fun, that's when they'll spend money on the game. So the big question is, what are these kind of unique experiences that you can enable with blockchain that you couldn't do so otherwise?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that because I also spotted that question and quite liked it. This question's come up lots for years and years in the discussions around, like 10 years ago especially, what is an indie game? And there were indies who I spoke to at the time who were like, well, you're making your game for profit. Like, that's not good. I'm like, well, I need to be able to pay my rent. Like, literally, I need to be able to pay my rent. So I've got to make a profit somewhere. And I don't think blockchain gaming is any different. For everyone here, your incentives are, in the end, what you're trying to do is make a good game. Why are you trying to make a good game? It can be a combination of to make a living. There is nothing wrong with making a living, and we should never, ever say otherwise. But in order to make a living, you might choose to do something that is very experimental and take big risks. Yep. You might choose to do something that is just a clone of another game because you think that's what's going to make you a better living. We might not respect that as much as a game, but there's also nothing wrong with that. But I think to be here now at this stage, I can't believe anyone here really is here going, I'm going to make a really big profit for my blockchain-based game, and that's why I'm doing it, unless you ICO'd last year. Because the reality is, we don't have any players.
Okay. So the beauty of Slido, as you say, it just makes a moderator's position redundant. They're actually reading the questions you're putting on there as priority and answering them, which is absolutely fantastic. So we've got 6 minutes to go. This is where it gets super exciting. And one thing I've noticed is that gambling question there, which has been sort of hanging around at number 2. I will answer that because it seems like it's going up and somebody votes it down. But because you've got 5 minutes, we will probably have another one more discussion item left. This is the time you start downvoting things which you see on the screen you don't want to be discussed, because we won't have time to cover everything you put on there. So what we'll do is we'll take on the where do you draw the line between gambling and blockchain, which it seems to be coming along, but I don't think it's Creative Commons as well. And if you probably haven't figured out, we've actually moved quite away from the Creative Commons design. But if people are enjoying this and you guys are deciding what we're going to talk about, let's talk about gambling. While we're doing that, you guys vote on just one topic now, which has already been put on there, which you want to vote up, and that's the next topic we're going to take. Right, let's talk about where do you draw a line between gambling and blockchain, and throw in some Creative Commons, because
I have to be honest, I'm not really a fan of this question. I'm really sorry. I think it's a completely different topic.
It is, exactly.
It's gambling. Yeah, gambling is gambling. That is defined in law in different territories. Blockchain gaming can involve gambling. I think that's fine, but I think it's far enough from this topic that I don't know if anyone's got anything to add.
No, why don't we tackle the
Creative Commons?
Yeah, so I think so. We'll definitely, so the next 4 minutes we've got, so let's go with which is what's right at the top. I'm going to give you another 5 seconds if you want to word it down or so, but I think it's got about 4 words. So by the way, when it shows thumbs up or 4, that means a lot of you are voting it down. And it just gives the net votes which are up there. So right, let's go for the very final discussion topics. We've got 4 minutes left. Creative Commons assets are used across all sectors. How could assets, and I'm going to put assets in quotes, released for game interoperability to protect, monetize elsewhere, and multiple licenses?
I think that's actually the beauty of smart contracts, right? If you have those assets on the blockchain, you could very well define how you would want to monetize it. François?
Yeah, I think there's a beautiful project from user-generated content from Big Crystal. I think it's called Nova Crystallis, and they want their gamer to draw cards, because they are selling cards. And yeah, you can create, I think there is something to create, like a standards to how we can make our Creative Commons assets, and how you can give some part of what you sell to the creator, and especially the user, and this will be very interesting for the next generation blockchain game.
Can one of you take up the word assets? What, if anybody is in doubt, what would be an asset as such? To me, it's anything and everything.
Yeah, right. So we kind of briefly mentioned it before. I think you did explain it, but just to take it in the context of the question. In theory, how can there's a crypto kitty. It's like there's a 2D image. You were saying making a space game. Do we show? We were saying, how would you represent the kitty if it was the pilot? And it was like, well, it could be like the skin of the spaceship actually has this on there. It could be like reskinning the HUD and the user profile, or it could be you actually have a 3D cat that's in the pilot seat. So asset can mean multiple things, or it could just be the fact that you own something. And in terms of like how can you protect and monetize, that's actually a really good question, because the reality is there's an element of this that if we're diving into it that is scary to the really big companies and IPs that you cannot protect. And I think quite rightly you should not protect. And that is this. I own this crypto kitty. I should have the right to prove my ownership to anyone in the world, and they should have the right to give me some benefit based on my ownership. No one should be able to stop that. I can do that in the physical world. Why can't I do it in the digital world? Everything else, though, I think you can protect. So the image rights, rules of transfer, like whether you need some fees if you transfer it to someone else, monetization, promotion aspects. It could be the software that's commonly used. It could be that in one of the blockchain projects that gets popular, perhaps it's set up so that the user images and wallets only promote certain cross-game functionality because it's been paid for or agreed. So there are lots of things we can do, but the one thing I think we should ever stop is a user who owns content proving their ownership. That's fundamental to how we need to change digital ownership.
And I mean, I go as far as even, I mean, audio, a bit of sound you've purchased as part of that assets or so. If it's in blockchain, then suddenly that could be used because you own that bit of the sound files or so. And yes, you can't create probably music or anything else out of it or so, but within game context or so, that why should that be any different than a skin? So we've got.
Just got one thing to add just on that. I think one of the things that everyone here and hopefully groups like the Blockchain Alliance and the game development companies, what we do need to do is actually come up with good sets of standard licenses that we can pick from easily and are easily understood, including allowing other developers to clearly understand, and where it's appropriate, communicating it to users. There's quite a lot written about this in even legal papers about the confusion for users about what their rights are, and it's the same for developers. So I think there's work to do here.
Right, we're actually exactly on time, so I'm going to switch this poll off. So sorry if you asked lots of amazing questions which nobody else cared about. So let's, I would have thought this would be filled, but it isn't. Can you guys fill this bit of the screen now? So we can see how many of you've released titles, how many of you are working on the titles. I would have thought it would have held it from when you guys filled in earlier on, but it seems like it's zeroed out. Sorry, say it again?
There is no more voting.
We're done.
No one has released anything. We're all unsuccessful.
Okay, I'm not going to try and figure out what went wrong there, but it seems like it has been long. Just show of hands, how many have released titles already on blockchain? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. How many? Oh, actually, it's working now. Off you go. On the panel, how many of you released the titles? How many are working on titles? How many are looking for funding? And then we'll close on that.
So I've put out many puzzles and interactive games just as community builders, not as so I've done over 50 puzzles at least, which are all mini games in a sense. But then we formed the company to build the actual product in January. That's the first time we've ever really thought about monetizing it. Before it was always access to give away.
Gabby?
So I've shipped maybe over 20 games, but we're working on our first blockchain game at the moment. We don't have anything to announce yet, but yeah, it's going to be very exciting.
I've done more games than I can remember. I've not done an actual blockchain game itself, just worked on tech and doing the bundle stuff. Sure. I'm just deciding what to do next.
So we release our next blockchain games, which is Beyond the Void, next month, and we have 2 games, I guess, on the go.
So, and if you look from the poll, I think we are in the right conference because it seems like everybody's working on a game. That's always great. And 25% have released the game. So well done on you on that. So first of all, thank you very much for my panel here. And thank you for all of you to be taking part in this interactive. And have a good evening. By the way, Alex and I have to dash for a flight, so we won't be around anymore. But I think the rest of the guys just ask the rest of the questions to them.
Yeah, we'll be around.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.